Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. All right, my friends, man, I had to work hard for this one. Mr. Lon Graham, inventor of the Graham Cracker Crust. He is here. You know, if you enjoy that kind of pie like I do, no. It's Lon Graham, sales expert, leadership expert. The man is in the studio. Welcome, Lon. I'm so glad you're here.
It's great to be here with you, David. And it's so funny that you say that, because when I make calls, and if I'm calling into a clinic or calling into somebody for the first time and I have to leave a message, I will often say Graham, like the crust on your favorite cheesecake, as a way to people to remember them and get them to laugh. So that's so perfect. Thank you.
There you go. We did not even arrange that ahead of time. I just was having a little bit of fun with you, and it totally works, by the way. It totally works.
Perfect. Thank you.
So tell us the Lon Graham story. No one's ever asked me this, Lon, but I'm on a podcast or an interview. I always wanted someone to say to me, so how did David Newman become David Newman? So I will do the service to you, my friend. How did Lon Graham become Lon Graham? And what were some of the interesting pit stops along your professional journey?
Yeah. So, thank you, Dave. And I think the thing that shaped me to this day the most is growing up, my dad was in the United States Air Force. And what that means is that we moved around a lot. And so about every 3 years, we're in a new place and I've got to make new friends and meet new people. And by the time I graduated from high school, I lived in 3 different countries, 7 different towns, and 10 different communities. And so you got to figure out how to meet people and how to connect with people, and how to, the way to connect with people is to find common ground. And as I look back on my life, that did so much to shape my profession and my professional sales career, my professional leadership career. And so, in doing that, I spent, then professionally, I remember my dad coming home. I'd struggled in college the first couple of times. I was trying to figure out what am I going to do. My dad comes home from a trip. He goes, I think you would really be a good flight attendant. Because he had just come off a trip and he had a great experience. So I'm like, Dad, that's great, but that's not the type of personality that I represent. But what it did, though, is it got me to look into some other opportunities in the airline industry. And so I ended up working for United Airlines for 10 years. I worked in a call center, and then I got into a leadership role and led a team of 60. And I had an operations manager that I reported to directly. And she had said, Lon, you've got some leadership experience. This is a great space. If you want to stay here, that's great. But she goes, the next thing you got to do professionally is get some sales experience. You've got to get out there and figure out how to get people to influence people's buying decisions, and not just with products and services, but with ideas. And how do you influence and guide and shape either a team or an organization or an industry? And I think, going back to my dad moving around and, finding common ground and finding a place where we can all go in the same direction, you got to start somewhere together to be able to go somewhere together. And so that, background was really helpful for that. And then I left United Airlines and I got into healthcare. I got into sales, and I got recruited to get into marketing, corporate events. I got recruited to get some outside sales experience at a Six Flags theme park just outside of DC. And the recruiter called me, he goes, just hear me out. He goes, I know it's not what you're looking for, but hear me out. And it turned out to be a fantastic experience. It was outside sales. I did that for a year, had a really successful year. My boss left. So when I came back the next season, they asked me if I'd interview for the leadership job, for the sales leader job. I got it. And then I got into healthcare sales, and my career just blossomed from there. As I look back, as we get older, we tend to look back on what influenced us. And to answer the question that you asked, David, what shaped me the most was moving around growing up and always having to figure out how to fit in where I was so that I could then fit in and make some progress.
How about that? That's really great. I want to go back just half a step to Six Flags because,
Sure.
it's so funny. Sales is so pervasive. I'm
Right.
sure folks listening are like, wait a minute, Six Flags has a sales team? So
Right.
is that group sales, corporate sales, incentive travel sales? What were you selling for Six Flags?
So, yeah, and thank you for asking, David, because it is. I had the same thing. I'm like, when the recruiter called me, I'm like, what are you talking about? And what I was selling, we had two different divisions. We had a school program where we worked with the schools in the community, and then I worked on the corporate side. And so when you think about corporate events and corporate programs and employee benefit programs, I'm working with the, directors of HR. I'm working with managing directors of highly successful law firms that all these people in their organization have families and they want to create some benefit programs, and a lot of organizations have summer events. And one of the summer events that you can do is you can buy a group package for your
Yeah.
company, and they can have the family summer event at Six Flags, and they spend a couple hours doing their picnic. And we did all the cooking and cleaning, and we had the space. And then they had all day to go play around at the park, and they could leave whenever they wanted.
Yeah.
So I was selling the events and programs. And at the highest level, I mean, we would do private events where we'd sell the park out. And there were a couple of companies. I was at the park just outside of DC, so it was specific to a park. But we had programs where we worked with companies in the area where they would buy the park out for the day, and it would be their company's event.
I am so curious, and I know prices have changed, but just ballpark, what would it cost to buy out a Six Flags property for a day?
This was 20 years ago. I think we're looking at, we had one event that was about $750,000 because it's going to be, a couple of things dependent, right? It's going to be dependent on what you're offering for your people. Are you buying everything everywhere?
Yeah.
Or are you only buying the food for your event and then they can spend money on everything else?
Right.
Are you buying alcohol? What do you, so customizable for sure. But you can spend $750,000 to $1 million on a buyout for a day. But that's over 1,000 person event too.
Sure, of course. No, that makes sense. And I'm guessing even timing, right? Seasonality and a Monday versus a Friday, all of those factor into it.
100%. Yeah. If you do it in July versus on a Saturday in July versus once the park closes after Labor Day during the week, you can buy a weekday. You're absolutely right. Seasonality does influence that as well.
Yeah, how about that? Very, very cool. Do you love selling? I know, me too. Do you hate selling? I know, me too. Listen, fantastic sales book you got to get your hands on. How do I know? It's mine. That's how. Do It Selling is now available for sale. Grab your copy, grab all the bonuses, all the companion tools, all the training, all the videos that go with it at doitselling.com. See you over there. I'm curious, having sold for so many different kinds of companies, so many different types of products and services, even calling on so many different kinds of buyers. And then, of course, a lot of our listeners are also selling themselves, right? So they're an independent consultant, coach, speaker, trainer, facilitator. You having experienced all of these from the, seven-figure sales to the $10, $15, $20,000 speech, training day, coaching package, etc. I want to really just dig in for a moment. The difference between selling for a big company, like when Six Flags logo is on your business card,
right,
versus here I am selling me, little David Newman, and there's just David Newman is on the business card. No big brand, no big infrastructure behind me, no perceived, huge brand or Super Bowl advertising campaign.
Right.
What have you found to be the difference between selling our own services versus selling for and with a bigger brand behind you?
I think, and this is a mistake I made. First of all, we've got to really be clear on what it is that we're selling and what it is that we offer. And one of the things for me that I learned, so, one of the things I didn't talk about is later in my career, I spent, almost 15 years in surgical sales working in orthopedics. And so I sold surgical products and I was in the operating room with surgeons and sold to hospitals and administrators as well. And I had a very clear, specific product. And when I was with Six Flags, I had a very clear, specific product. I had something I was selling. Now at Six Flags, we were selling fun. The park was access to the fun, but we were selling the experience. In surgical sales, I'm selling my expertise and I'm selling a product that they're using. I bring those two together, very, very different industries, but the common theme is it's very clear what I was selling. And when I got out of that and when I started getting into coaching and when I started giving talks, some of it was I wasn't clear in my own mind because there's, I can talk about sales, I can talk about leadership, I can talk about coaching. I've done some athletic coaching. I can talk about all of that. But if I tell you that I can talk about all of that, then, I'm a buffet and you're not really going to a buffet. You want somebody who can come in and really help the people and really clearly communicate things to the people on your team, whatever we're talking about. And so I think whether we're in sales, David, or whether it's leadership, or whether it is you or, we talk about, we're old enough to remember Jacques Cousteau. Jacques Cousteau was the underwater expert, right? If you hear his name, you're talking about underwater experience, period. Same thing. What do people think about? And if you tell them all the things you can do, they don't remember any of it. They're going to think about somebody who does something very specific. And so to answer the question that you asked, David, I think really is what we need to get clear on in our own mind, not what we can do, but what we want to do and what we will do, and make that a single lane to start with. And if we can pick one lane and really focus on that lane, make your name there, then it's going to be clear to the people that want to hire you that they're going to hire you for being in that lane. Does that make sense?
Oh, a ton of sense. And it's funny for our listeners of a certain age. I love the Jacques Cousteau analogy because imagine if Jacques Cousteau, I also lead mountaineering expeditions.
Right.
I also take people on safaris in Africa. It's like, he would be a nobody. He'd be like, okay,
Right.
He's like a travel guy. Because, for 50 years or 60 years, however long his career was, he's the underwater guy.
Right.
The only context in which Jacques Cousteau makes any sense or would get any attention is underwater, on the ocean, in the ocean, under the ocean, with photography and with film and with documentaries and with entertainment. That was his thing. Not mountaintops, not safaris, not deserts, not anything.
Right.
And I love your distinction between can. I think I have an old blog post from like probably 10 plus years ago that says something like, can will kill you, right? I can do this and I can do leadership and I can do sales and I can do marketing and I can do team building and I can do strategy and I can do communication skills. And so this is how I started my business. In 2002, I literally went out as a jack of all trades, master of none. I had 30 different workshops because I figure, well, if you don't need something from column A, maybe you need something from column B. I was like a walking Chinese restaurant. And it's really tough to make a living as a generalist. 20 years ago, it was still tough. Today, it's almost impossible.
Right. Because
no one needs a generalist, right? We got Google, we got Chat GPT, we got AI. Nobody needs a generalist anymore. We need deep dive, pardon my Jacques Cousteau reference.
Right.
We need deep dive, hardcore experts. And that's what the world is hungry for. And that's what there's also a premium price tag on.
Right. Well, and you're 100% right. And I think the challenge is this. I'm going to build on what you said, David. The challenge is this, is we come out and we say we can do everything and nobody pays attention to us. If we say we can do one thing, they come to us for that one thing and we create a great experience. Then they'll ask us, well, what else can you do? Yeah. And that's where you get the opportunity to expand. That's where you get the opportunity to get into parallel lanes. But you've got to define a very single lane to get people's attention and get them and get in. Once you're in, you can identify opportunities. But until you break that shell, until you get in, it doesn't matter what you can do.
Yes.
They want to know what you will do.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Lon, you also shared something that I want to go back to about your surgical sales experience. And this is about buyer intimacy. You said, we're selling surgical instruments. I'm standing there in the OR with the surgeons. Go into a little bit about that. So you're selling the instrument. What were you there to learn? What were you there to listen for? What was your job when you were in the operating room as a sales professional?
Sure. Well, the reality of it is the sales piece was prior to getting into the room. Once I got into the room, I was the product expert.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of things going on. And let's be very clear. Doctors and surgeons go to medical school and they go to training and they are experts. So they need me in the operating room? 99% of the time they don't. But here's what I'll tell you. I spent more time in the operating room than an orthopedic surgeon did. And the reason for that is they operate on an island. Doctors are in there operating with their team, and their team is maybe a PA, surgical assistants, and then the nurses that are running the room and making sure the patient is okay. And then you've got an anesthetist that's monitoring the patient, is monitoring the patient's really their health. And so that's their team. Well, a couple of things, right? They don't see other people operate. I'm in the operating room with 25, 30, 40 different surgeons. So I get experience at all kinds of different things. So maybe a surgeon's seeing something for the first time that I've seen maybe a half a dozen times, and I can bring some level of experience. And here's a perfect example. And, when we work with people long enough, we become friends with them. I mean, that's just, we get to know each other. We care about each other. We become friends with them. And I'm out of that. And there's still some surgeons that I'm still friends with. I still play golf with. We still talk with. So I was in the operating room with this one surgeon. You get this rhythm. They go in, they prepare the patient. You get in, and we focused a lot on arthroscopic surgery where you're using cameras to see inside joints. And so I said, okay, I'm going to run to the bathroom while you're getting ready. I'll be back. The surgeon told the nurse, go get Lon. I want to show him this. I walked in, and he'd been operating for 20 years. And I walk into the operating room. I come back, I go, what's wrong? And he sticks the camera in and he goes, look at this. Have you ever seen this? And I've seen it about 4 or 5 times. He goes, that's the first time I've ever seen it like that. But the point of it is that I bring perspective that surgeons don't get. So once I get into the operating room, I become a consultant for the surgeon. But even more important, let's say, at 3:00 in the afternoon, most surgeries start at 7 in the morning.
Yeah.
You're in there, surgeons, if it's your operating day, you're probably operating until 5 or 6 in the afternoon. Well, at some point, the team changes. And so if the surgical staff changes over and you're still operating, there's got to have somebody that has continuity, that contributes to the continuity of that procedure. And you don't want it to be the doctor because the doctor's operating. So I become a consultant. I become a resource. I become, once I'm in the operating room, and the longer you do it, you talk about it all the time, David, a trusted resource. You talk about, being a trusted advisor. Same concept, right? When you're around long enough, and I did it for 10 years. And so let's say very conservatively, if you use 50 weeks a year, and let's say I was in 4 surgeries a day, that's 20 a week. That's 1,000 a year. I've solved 10, 11,000 surgeries over my time. Well, that's more than any surgeon has seen. And so I get to bring a whole lot of perspective, and I get to bring things. And then also, though, we had a high level of education that we invested in, because you don't want your doctors, you don't want your accountants, you don't want your lawyers to stop learning when they get out of school. You want them to continue to develop their craft. And as technology evolves, you want them to be up to date on the technology so that they can make good decisions. So we were invested in that, and I was involved with training and education so that when we go back into the room, we had done some things together in lab environments that they would know as well. So I don't know if I answered your question, but it was really a consulting experience once we're in the operating room.
That is really, really fascinating. Now, I don't have any clue how surgical instruments are sold. Are you selling that directly to the surgeon? Because each surgeon has their own personal set of tools. Are you selling it to the hospital administrator? Who's the economic buyer in that equation?
Yeah, so the decision maker and the check writer continue to evolve, right? And in healthcare, as we look at healthcare, it continues to evolve. surgeons have preferences of equipment and implants and instrumentation that they want to use. So they have preferences. The people in the hospital or in the surgery center, the administrators and the buyers they've got to work together so that there's an element of consistency. And if you've got somebody and so working with the administrators and the hospital and the surgery centers, as I got to know them too, we could work together to reduce some of the multitude of equipment so that surgeons could have, common equipment to work from. So you can make it more cost effective for the facility and still give surgeons the freedom to choose within a certain lane.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of surgeons want to use the things that they're most comfortable with. The administrators want to be economically effective and want to be cost effective, not cheap, but they want to make good decisions, right? They don't want to have a lot of excess. And so if they can create some parallel lanes for, 10 surgeons that operate in that facility to have a balance of equipment that they can work from, some basic equipment, and then there's some specialty equipment that they'll want for themselves.
My wife actually had 2 hip replacement surgeries, both very successful. And
Yay.
this was the first time it even occurred to me. The doctor starts talking about what brand of hip is
Right.
going in. So we went with Zimmer. Zimmer
Yep.
makes these hips, German company. And it's like, well, do you want the Lexus? Do you want the BMW or some of these made in Japan? Can I get a British one? I mean, does it come in a convertible? Leather or cloth? Are they heated seats in there? What's going on with the hips?
Right.
But literally these brand decisions, and of course, Zimmer has a big sales force. Our
Right.
surgeon happened to be like a Zimmer test case doctor.
Sure.
So he would report back and he would, sort of Zimmer would sponsor some of his research and so on.
Sure.
It's just a fascinating world.
Yep. And that's the world I lived in. We did a lot on the sports medicine side. So a lot of soft tissue. I don't represent the company anymore, but I'm a huge Georgia football fan. I started my college career at the University of Georgia, and I'm still connected to a lot of people that work for the company that I represented. And one of my good buddies still works there, and he went to Georgia as well. So we always go back and forth. And when Georgia's tight end got hurt twisted his ankle and was injured, he went in the operating room the next day, and my buddy's texting me. He goes, "Hey, he's got our stuff in there." So it's that kind of thing, right? Yeah. So to your point, your wife has 2 hip replacements with Zimmer.
Yeah.
Well, that was the space that I competed in and the space that we worked in. And it's, who are you working with? What are you comfortable with? You talk about leather interior versus cloth interior versus, a convertible versus a hard top. You want a 6-cylinder versus an 8-cylinder, and all of those things in implants. There's plastic and metal and synthetic and biologic and all kinds of things. So there's a lot to consider, and you want somebody who knows exactly what they're talking about to be there as a resource.
Well, you mentioned football, so I think we have to get into some sales blocking and tackling. So can I ask you just a couple of scenario-based questions?
Love it. Yeah.
So think about a time, and this could be selling at any chapter of your selling career. Think about a time when you really thought that you blew it. You thought that, oh my gosh, this prospect, they're never going to buy. I totally blew it, or something just went off the rails, and they ended up buying anyway. So it's sort of a story of grabbing victory from the jaws of defeat. Does any kind of story come to mind for you?
Yeah. One of the things we talked about last year, worked with the RVA Small Business Network, and it was a startup, and it was a media-based startup. And when we first got started, we brought something new to the market, and you've had some experience with that, and it's a great experience. We were trying to do some work with one of the local government agencies. I'm in Richmond, Virginia, and I'm in a county just outside of Richmond. We had kept trying to work with this organization, and I actually know the county manager. He's in the Rotary Club that I'm in. And so we had talked about it, and he had his chief of staff contact me. She came and did a tour, and then crickets. They just went away, and they went away. And we had our studio up. We were ready. We were launching our product. We were going to work with them on promoting the county and promoting programs in the county, and we were looking for ways to do that. And we had this great avenue, and all of a sudden it just went silent. And I kept trying to follow up, and I was in the wrong place and thought I was talking to the wrong person. And about 3 months later, somebody from the Economic Development Authority, which is an arm of the county, the marketing person contacted me and said, "Hey, look, I'd like to talk to you about what we're doing." And I said, "Well, I was talking to the chief of staff, county manager. Do you want to work through her? What do you want to do?" She goes, "Well, hold on, let me call them and I'll call you back." And so because their fiscal year is July 1, they were in Q4 when we got started, and they went silent because they were finishing a quarter and they just disappeared. And so we got a new quarter, a new fiscal year, got re-engaged, got an opportunity, and we ended up signing a contract with them in the Q4 of the calendar year, but Q2 of their year. And we've got the county manager in, and we got the executive director of the development authority in. And so sometimes you just got to stay with it and, continue to be available. Now, you don't get desperate, but you got to continue to be available and create opportunities for them to stay engaged and stay top of mind. And hopefully you'll get another opportunity. We got another opportunity and it worked out for us.
Yes. How about that? So that's such a great lesson because, sometimes prospects go dark, prospects disappear, there's delays. I always tell entrepreneurs and sales professionals that 90% of the time, that has nothing to do with you. It's, they don't like me. They don't want the service. They don't want the program. They think we're too expensive. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Maybe it's the end of the quarter. Maybe they have some other priority. Maybe their company just got reorganized, their business unit or their division. And literally, if you look at it in hindsight, about 90% of the time, this has nothing to do with us as the salespeople, and it's got everything to do with them and what's going on with their team and so forth. So, similar question, except flipped the other way. This is about a little bit of kind of sales complacency or maybe even sales arrogance. Can you think of a time when you're like, this is great. They love us. This is clicking along. Everything is in the bag. I'm already spending the commission money. I can't imagine, Lon, that they wouldn't buy. And boom, last minute, they disappear. Lon, we're going in a different direction. Lon, we decided to hold off on this. And it's something that you either didn't do or didn't see or didn't say, but you felt it. And then that's when the deal slipped away from you. So something that you thought was in the bag, but it totally fell apart at the last minute.
I'll go back to, we talked about surgical sales. So I'll talk about when I was doing that. I was about a year and a half in, and we'd taken over from another organization that was completely underperforming. I had a couple of advocates on the surgeon side that they were like, "We just want to get exposed to what you're doing." They brought me in. We worked together, and we're really building some strong and powerful momentum. And they had some changes in leadership at the hospital. And the person who was the person that was starting to warm up to me, because, look, in that environment, it's a long play, and you've got to get to know people, and you got to feel confident, and people buy confidence, that, David. And so I had this new person. I wasn't lackadaisical, but I wasn't as thorough as I could have been. And I didn't bring enough people in. So I had an advocate. I had somebody that was in there rooting for me. I was starting to bring in another potential customer. We were going to do a big buy at the hospital. And the new person came in. And that new person came in from out of the area. And because they came in from out of the area, they had experience with another company. And so they brought their experience to the table and said, "Well, I'm more familiar with this company." Now, they weren't familiar with the local representation or any and all of that, but it doesn't matter. They brought their experience with them and their level of comfort and their confidence, and they were going to use that to leverage the buying decision. And so the point I'm making is that I didn't do enough to get enough people involved. And that's true even if nobody changes. Sometimes we don't get enough of the people involved that can influence decision-making. You may have 5 people making a decision, but it only takes one to say, "I'm not willing to buy into that."
Yeah.
So I don't know if that really answered your question.
No, it totally does. Well, and I think that also speaks to the power of sales inoculation, where early in the process, you're asking, "Hey, there's a whole bunch of stakeholders, and I totally realize that this can be a little bit of a hot potato issue. Are there some factors or some people that would stand in the way of this deal? Are there some factors or are there some people who might oppose doing what we're talking about doing?
Right.
And so, let's say you and I are both consultants and we ask this question of an economic buyer. And so, oh no, Lon, I totally, we need the leadership training. We want the leadership training. I will tell you though, Brenda, who's our CFO and who would sign your check, Brenda hates consultants. And you're like, well, I'm glad I asked because now I know there's a hidden obstacle under the waterline. Right. So then we could start a whole series of questions. Well, has Brenda had a negative experience with consultants in this company? No, this was 3 companies ago. Have you ever had a positive experience with consultants here that Brenda go, oh, well, yeah. So there's a million questions, right? But if we never ask the who or what might stand in our way, that's when you get blindsided. That's when you get taken out at the last minute.
100%. Yeah, that's well said, David. Well said.
Yeah. Hey, if you're loving this episode as much as I am, pop over to doitmarketing.com/manifesto and get your free 37-page download guide to how to sell smarter, sell more easily, sell more often. That's what we're here to help you with at The Selling Show. Off you go. Last question, because you and I could talk tactics and tips all day. This is so great. A lot of times people say, well, I'm selling something big, right? Enterprise sale, couple 100,000, maybe even a couple million. Big sales take a long sales cycle. They will tell you, period, end of sentence. Always. Big sales always take a ton of time, months or years. My philosophy, and I'd love your take on this, is a sales cycle takes as long as we have our sales process designed for. You can have a sales process that's designed for a fairly quick sale, regardless of size and scope and depth. Or you can play the buyer's game and say, no, definitely get back to me in 6 months or 9 months or 10 years or whenever. But our pace and cadence as a sales professional sets the pace and the cadence for the buyer's side. What are your thoughts on that? Or what have you found effective in speeding up a sales process, no matter what the scope of the deal?
I think that you have a great point, David. And we tend to allow what we're told to dictate our behavior. And so if we have a sales cycle, like, okay, well, there's a 18-month renewal process, or there's a 3-year contract, and we'll start looking at it at the 18-month mark, any of that. Okay, well, we take, our process is this long. Well, I think if we allow that, then that's true. You're 100% right. I think the successful people and the people that win are the ones that dictate timing. Now, that doesn't mean that it won't take 3 years or it won't take 18 months. But what it does mean is you don't have to wait 3 years or 18 months for a decision. You can get them to commit and make a decision much earlier in the buying cycle, because if you wait till the end, then you become part of the all others, right? But if you can get that level of commitment before they tell you this is when we're going to make a decision, if you can offer some incentives, and maybe you can even short circuit the contract and you offer enough incentive to short circuit their current contract, and then you can go ahead and get them to sign early. So I think the salespeople that win, to your point, David, the ones that are the most successful are the ones that take control and take ownership of their own timing. And they're also the ones that will continue to ask for the business along the way. They're the ones that will say, hey, we could always do this now, or, I'm ready if you're ready. If you're willing to go ahead and do something a little bit different, let's talk about what that could look like. Those are the people that are engaging the buyer in the thought process of, well, maybe maybe we don't have to wait. Maybe I can get, because the buying process sucks for a buyer. Let's just call it what it is. So if you can make their life easier and reduce their burden of decision making, they love you as long as it's reasonable. So I think, to your point, I'll go back to this. I've said it a couple of times, but I think it's worth saying again. The sales professionals that take control and take ownership of that process are the ones that are willing to be. not overly aggressive, but the ones that are willing to, speed up the process a little bit, maybe test the waters a little bit more, are the ones that you get beat by if you're not doing it.
Yeah, such a great point. I remember there was a book many, many moons ago by a woman named Sharon Drew Morgan called Buying Facilitation. And she said, listen, we're not really in the sales business. We're in the buying facilitation business. We need to help them buy better, faster, stronger, smarter. When you help them buy, everything becomes easier. And you're right, Lon, that you are taking this burden because no one likes a long, painful, difficult, drawn out process. They don't like buying that way. We certainly don't like selling that way.
Right.
So I love that reframe about help them buy faster, smarter, and easier.
And I'll add one other thing too. I think it applies. We talk about the burden of buying and the burden of decision making. There's this great thing about the paradox of choice, right? The more choices you give somebody, the harder it is for them to choose.
Yeah.
And so, we talk about 2 or 3 max options, and we can, go into the benefits or merits of that. But the reality of it is this, is that somebody buying something, that's typically, unless they're a designated buyer and that's all they do every day, they're typically not motivated to spend all of their time doing this. So the easier you can make it for them, the easier you can make it for them to work and work with you, the more successful you're going to be, and the more likely they're going to want to get you to keep working with them.
Yes. Oh my gosh, for sure. Well, Lon Graham, as we're landing the plane here, thank you so much for sharing all of this amazing expertise. Where can people go to get connected and stay connected to more Lon Graham brilliance?
Yeah, thank you, David. I think the best place is if you go to LinkedIn, it's real straightforward. It's Lon Graham, like you said, the cracker on your favorite cheesecake, the crust on your favorite cheesecake. Yeah, if you go there, and then there's avenues to get me in other places, but I think that's the most consistent and the place where people get the most out of it.
So the link to Lon's LinkedIn profile is going to be directly under this episode at thesellingshow.com. Do connect with Lon. Make sure to take full advantage of his brilliance. And if Lon, should people talk, should they mention in their LinkedIn connection request that they heard us on the show?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'd love to know that and promote the show as well.
Awesome. Very, very good. Well, Lon Graham, just like the crust on your very favorite cheesecake, you are brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you, Dave. It was a lot of fun.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.